You're listening to WSBU 88.3 The Buzz, and I'm Cassidey Kavathas, the news director here at the station, and I'm here with Dean Whitcomb today as we begin our special edition of Bona News, and we remember and celebrate the life of St. Bonaventure University's president, Dr. DePerro, who passed away due to COVID-19 complications during the early morning hours of March 1st. I met Dean when I was during my admissions process here at Bona's, and he became a close friend of DePerro during his short 4 years here. So,
thanks, Cassie. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. It's been funny. I was talking with my fiance last night about where you and I first met and how we accepted you live downtown Buffalo at the Canisius game at KeyBank Center, and it's been fun getting to know you as well. So I not only got a friendship with Dr. DePerro, but I have a friendship with Cassidey, which is just super cool. But yeah, thank you for having me today. For those of you who are unfamiliar with who I am, I'm our Assistant Director of Admissions here at St. Bonaventure. I'm also a very proud graduate from the class of 2008, and I happen to also be the 15th Bonaventure graduate in my family. So we bleed brown and white in my house.
you also told me before we started that this is your first time ever being on the Buzz. Even being an alum, this is your first time live in the radio today.
Yeah.
I've never, there's not a lot of Bonaventure firsts for me anymore. I've done a lot of things that, we used to have a list of like the 101 things to do at Bonaventure before you graduate and all those things. And I've done a lot of them, and with 15 Bona grads before me, I've experienced Bonaventure my entire lifetime, but I've never done a live segment on the Buzz. I definitely have been on one of these mics before accepting a student on the air, but I was on for 5 seconds. So this is a little bit more in depth, and I'm excited to be here. So thank you.
To start it off, we were talking about first meeting people. How did you first meet Dr. DePerro?
I think the first conversation I ever had with him was at move-in day. We always have such a huge festivity here, when all the students that we've spent a lot of time out recruiting finally move into campus and start their time here as students. And we do the candlelight ceremony classically. We can't wait to get back to doing stuff like that again. It's been a long time. But the night of candlelight, that year, Dr. DePerro invited our admissions team after parents and everybody left campus to come to the presidential dining room for kind of a cocktail hour and hors d'oeuvres. So that's probably the first conversation I ever had with him, I think. And first time I ever shook his hand. So it's just amazing to me looking back at that, like how genuine he was. I remember when Sister Margaret was here and introduced as the president of St. Bonaventure while I was a student. It's just kind of, you look at somebody that wears the title of university president, and you think that they are so far above, you know what I mean? Like they're so disconnected. But honestly, both she and Dr. DePerro, but especially Dr. DePerro, in my experiences here, as we dealt with the pandemic and lots of challenges, he really just is like this super accessible, super relatable, just genuine, nice guy. And it was just such a pleasure to actually have a conversation with him and realize, oh, he's just a regular guy like me. So
I met him kind of in the same way. I was moving in and he pulled around in his golf cart. Like, that's how I always saw him around campus. And he walked up, I was running all my stuff up the stairs, and he walked up to my mom. And my mom had met him previously at, I think, Scholars Day, another admissions event. And the first thing he asked my mom was, "Oh, how are you and your son?" Like, he remembered that I had a brother. And I just thought that was really unique. And he was just always, every time I met him, he was cheery, and he really seemed like he loved it here.
Yeah, it was, I know that you and I spoke last week when we were putting together the article that you wrote tremendously, by the way, for the BV. And we talked about, how he just related to everybody, and like his attention to detail and like his memory were just unbelievable. Like, even from just brief interactions here and there, coming in and out of the administration building and talking to each other on the way into work, or talking to each other as we broke for lunch or anything like that. he always checked in about like my family and my relationship with my fiance Lauren and her parents and everybody. Like he just remembered everything, and it was amazing.
Back to when last week we were writing I wrote the Bonaventure story about DePerro's passing, and I interviewed Dean for it, and he had a really touching story. He called it his favorite memory, exactly, and it was about when he got the ring for his fiancée Lauren, and you can take it away from here because you know the story way better than I do.
Well, so
It's really funny because the reference that I made a few seconds ago about your acceptance at KeyBank Arena, it all kind of comes back to this original moment. And so I had been shopping, I'd been ring shopping for quite a while, and I had never really entertained shopping, at Jared up in Buffalo, and I had completed my daily visits to high schools. I was in the North Towns that day, and my last stop had been Niagara Wheatfield. So I came back down and onto Niagara Falls Boulevard, and I was, not that I want to spend too much time talking about my diet, but I was sitting at Chipotle, and I just remember being on the phone with my boss, and I'm like, I've got a lot of time before I have to get to this dinner tonight. In South Buffalo for Dr. DePerro. He was being honored by Bishop Timon, where he went to high school, with the Hillary Award for excellence in leadership. And it was, I had like 2 or 3 hours. So I was like, well, I see this Jared store out there. I'm just going to go check it out. And I'm a very creative person, as I think that you probably know by now. So I sat down in there, and next thing you know, 2.5 hours had passed, and I designed a whole ring. And it was awesome, and it was the right way to do it. I was, I had done the typical guy thing. I had called my dad, made sure that he knew what I was up to, and he was super proud. But all of a sudden I realized I have 30 minutes to get to South Buffalo, and I am completely on the north end of it right during high traffic time. And I didn't know if I was going to make it. So I race in there. I barely had time to squeak by an ATM to make sure that I had money for like the cash bar and everything. And I get in there right at the end of cocktail hour, and Dr. DePerro looks at me and he's like, "Oh, I thought you weren't going to make it." And it's just the words you want to hear from a university president. Like, he knew I was missing and I was supposed to be there. So I was like, great, here we go. But we sat down, and I was like bursting at the seams, I was so excited that I had finally found like the right ring. And so I'm like, what's it going to hurt? I got to tell somebody. Who better to trust than Dr. DePerro? Because he was always so excited to hear about my relationship and everything. So I shared it with him, and I told him, sorry I was a little late, but I got here because I got here a little late because I'd been spending so much time at the jeweler. I actually bought Lauren's engagement ring. And he went like ear to ear with that smile that we all knew, and he grabbed his wife's hand. She was sitting on the other side of him. So it was like myself, then him, then her. And he grabbed his wife's hand and he like pulled it over across his dinner plate. And he just pretended like he was just holding her hand. And she didn't think anything of it at first, but she was quick. She scooped something was up. So she looks over and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, I was just going to show him your ring." And so I got to see her ring, and we talked for a few minutes. I got Lauren a pear cut stone, or a teardrop stone, which he actually had almost entertained buying a teardrop stone back when he bought Mrs. DePerro's ring. And but he went with the marquee, both of which are back and popular now, right? But he showed me the stone and everything, and he talked about his experience when he bought her ring and all of the things he was feeling. And it was like, you could tell, like, he still spoke as excitedly and almost nervously when he was telling me the story. Like, it was like he was refeeling all of those emotions that he had that day. And he bought it from this jeweler in one of the buildings downtown Buffalo. And he went back out to his car, and he kept saying, like, he was sitting in his car and he was just opening and closing the box over and over and staring at the ring for Mrs. DePerro. And he just sat there for he's like, "I bet you I was out there for 35 minutes looking at the ring." And then all of a sudden somebody rapped on the window and knocked on the door, and scared him so bad he tossed the ring to the other seat onto the floorboard. because he didn't want anybody to see what was going on. And he thought must be he had parked somewhere too long, and it was maybe a cop telling him he needed to move his vehicle. It was actually like a cousin of hers who had knocked on the window, and he was very glad that he kind of stashed the ring quickly, because it was something that was really important to him. He wanted her to be so surprised. So that's kind of the story, I guess, in terms of what we ended up talking about that night. But and this is the magical part, he and Mrs. DePerro ended up giving me marital advice for like the next 45 minutes while we ate dinner. And it was just like such a special memory of mine. They told me some really important things, but one of the coolest things that he said was, one of the things that he has been important to him is his devotion to his wife and family. And he goes, so if you're gonna say you're devoted, be devoted. He's like, anything you've got to do, if you need to, work your schedule around so it drives you crazy, just as long as you're there for your family when they need it and when they would love it or benefit from it. He's like, that's devotion. And he's like, I know that that's been the most important thing in my life at home, is I've always wanted to be there for every moment, big or small. And so he gave me that piece of advice. And then he also, he and Mrs. DePerro both kind of shared that, as you enter into marriage, the one recommendation they would give is to never forget what lit that spark in your eye for each other in the first place, to never forget what you thought was so special about that other person, that you went from maybe even not even knowing them to meeting them, falling in love, and then realizing you don't ever know how you could have lived without them. And so he just kind of spoke about, never forgetting what you thought was so special about each other in the first place. And even if you're ever angry with each other, you need to take time apart, to cool down before you talk things out, anything like that. He goes, it's always good to circle back to some of those original moments where you fell in love and you knew that something was really special there. Talk about that for a moment. It's an easy way to get through anything. So that's kind of the story, and easily my favorite memory by far of Dr. DePerro.
I read your interview because I interviewed him through email the day we found out the news. And I remember I was reading that and I just started tearing up because I was like, this is such a sweet story. And I always want to hear it. I feel like it's so special. And it really shows his true character, that he talked about his devotion. Whoa, English. He talked about his devotion to his family, and I feel like he was devoted to the Bonaventure community as a whole. I feel like he truly thought every single one of us was special, and he had a small place in his heart for each one.
He,
you talk about a guy who was devoted to Bonaventure. I distinctly remember, especially like last year when summer hit and we had to really buckle down and start putting together plans for how would we have students back on campus, what was going to need to change so that we could do so safely, but to also maintain that Bona magic, that everybody gets to feel when they come to this campus, where you have that togetherness feel here, that family oriented thing. And he was so good at trying to make sure that those things still shone through, no matter how far apart we had to stand, whether we had to wear masks inside and out, whether it was just so important to him that we preserved what makes Bonaventure so special, but also made sure we had the safest possible environment. And I know, in a way, he knew that it was going to be something that not everybody was going to be a fan of, having to wear a mask everywhere they go on campus. Not everybody was going to be happy if we had to crack down and there were student suspensions or anything like that for a violation of policy. This is a guy that loves higher education and absolutely loves St. Bonaventure. And that dates back to when he was in high school. So it was a very hard thing, but he knew it was the right thing. And he just did that. He made these tough decisions with this sense of calmness and came down around all of our offices and, talked to us on Zoom. And anytime he got a chance to speak with us, and it was easy to see, okay, this is where we're going to go and we're going to be okay. And our leader's got a great plan. So he really cared about this place so much. And it's still hard. It's very hard to believe like we're going to be back in that administration building and he's not going to walk through the door. It's such a strange thing still to think about. But
I feel like it hasn't really even set in yet, even like as just a student here. It's kind of like, oh, it happened. And then we're like, you don't really have the time to think about it long and hard.
Yeah, it's like it's the weirdest thing. The pandemic
has created such a distance between just even people. Like if you have to quarantine or if you have to be away from family because, you've been exposed or anything, it just creates this distance. And, we had such a disconnect. I felt like it was so hard knowing he was in a hospital and knowing what he was likely going through. We don't know, obviously, every day. We heard the same thing you guys all heard. There were ups and there were downs. And but he had that presence that I think all of us kind of hoped, but we all felt like, we're going to beat this and, he's going to be okay and we're going to get him back. And it just was such a shock.
I feel like it's really Bonaventure's spirit to
Yeah.
keep optimistic, even with silly things like the basketball games. We're always like, we're going to do it, we're going to do it. And so it must have been a huge shock for everyone on that Monday morning to look at your email and realize, oh.
Yeah. You always think about Monday being the worst day of the week anyways. Having to wake up Monday morning and get back to business is always like, oh, man, the weekend's already over. But I told you, and I know that you quoted me in the article, that I just kind of felt like something was off that day.
I feel like everyone did. I talked to
A lot of people about this topic. And I remember the night before Sunday night, obviously, I just couldn't fall asleep. I couldn't fall asleep at all. I remember I stayed up to like 3, 4 in the morning. I just couldn't get any rest. And it was just, the morning just felt so uneasy. And I was like, something's going to happen. And sadly, something did.
Yeah, that's one of those unfortunate life experiences that like you'll never forget where you were and what you were doing. I hate those.
Yeah.
But at the same time, those moments are so painful and so shocking because of the impact and all of the positive stuff that has happened because of or with that person. So, and Dr. DePerro, you talk about impact.
Of course.
I can't even tell you,
obviously I heard from a lot of people here at this university. There were a lot of folks in the Office of Admissions here throughout our building that knew that I would regularly, seek Dr. DePerro out just to talk through things, whatever, talk about admissions conferences that we were going to be attending and people to network with and, family stuff, even just fun stuff, just to kind of talk and just relate to one another. But I didn't just hear from people at St. Bonaventure. It was such an emotional week as it was, but just all the positive vibes and like the outreach that I got, not only from people here, students that I've recruited, families that I have recruited from the Buffalo region, back when I recruited from the Syracuse region. I heard from all of them. I got sympathy cards for my loss. And I'm like, I appreciated it, but I was like, man, like that says something about like how much impact this guy had everywhere he went. Anyone that knew him, like I've never met someone who ever was like, thought he was not the greatest guy. You know what I mean? Like everyone that knew him thought he was like just the best. And I heard from Office of Admissions at other universities. I got outreach from several counselors at Niagara and from Canisius and St. John Fisher, just hoping that we're all doing okay. No one wanted us all to know in the Office of Admissions here that we're in their thoughts. And these are people that are competitors of mine at the end of the day, but also I think it gets overlooked. Like we see each other all the time when we're out recruiting and we network with each other, we become friends. So we support each other like family. But it was just something about Dr. DePerro that like his impact, what he stood for, how he stood for things, and always remain composed. And he seemed to always have the right words for whatever situation. They all knew that. And they knew that he was so important to our Bonaventure community and how well he fit here, that they took it took time out of their own day to reach out to people like me and just make sure we're doing all right. And like that's just like such a special thing. And it just tells such a story about how many lives Dr. DePerro touched across the field of higher education, across the state of New York, and probably many more places that I can't even consider because I don't know about, you know?
I was putting together interviews. I, of course, talked to a lot of freshmen because we've only known him for like a little bit over a semester, so it was hard to kind of take this loss. Like, we just met you, and now you're already gone. And I remember talking to one of my friends, and she was like, I regret so much that I never got to talk to him.
Yeah.
Because he just touched everyone in a certain way that you just, even if you haven't met him, you felt like his friend.
Yeah, he had that smile that just kind of snuck out of the side of his mouth and everything, and it was like such a warm, welcome to any student, any family, anybody. He always had stories that could connect, himself with the lives of anybody that was coming to campus to experience this place, whether as a prospective student, a student athlete. He knew everybody, and that's just something that I think is, tremendous. I remember watching unfortunately we lost, our basketball team lost that night.
Yeah.
But I can't even imagine how it felt for all those guys. They all knew him. Every one of us knew who he was and got a chance to, meet him, interact with him, something, see him around campus, see how positive he was about everything, driving the golf cart around when the pandemic hit, just to make sure everybody was doing okay, check in, say hello, let everybody know he knew how tough everything was, but it was going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And we are going to get through this. We're not there yet, but we have to keep pushing forward and doing exactly what Dr. DePerro would want us to do. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to persevere, and we're going to do the Bona thing and come together as a family like nobody else in the country knows how. And no other university knows how. It's just something that's going to be an important step for us, is to collectively come together and to move forward. So.
Speaking of the basketball game, I remember
I live in Robb, which is a dorm here on campus, and I remember sitting there watching the basketball game, and you just felt like you were in the Riley Center, even if you weren't there. And it was just so moving. I think there's a picture of Jared Holmes with the flowers, and that's just such a moving picture, and it shows the true effect he had on everyone here.
Yeah, it's just this whole campus, we really respected him, and one of the things I said in the article, I think, was that he fit this place like a puzzle piece. It was the right guy at the right time with the right plans, and it lined up so perfectly. And he also has, a tremendous background, not only in higher education at private Catholic universities, but he comes out of Bishop Timon, which is a Franciscan high school in Buffalo. And so the values and everything that he grew up with, they were so important to him. And to see him actually get his chance to come to this university and to be the president and have an impact and to embrace all those values at a time where I think we really needed it. It was truly special. So, and actually speaking of Bishop Timon, I know that you referenced, I know that several news articles, I think, have referenced that, you really wanted to come to school here, but due to a better scholarship offer from our dear friends at Canisius, they were lucky enough to grab him for his undergraduate experience. But I'll never forget when he was first introduced to our campus. I didn't get to meet him that day, but it was back when all of us could be in the same room, do you remember that far back?
I gotta think of it, though.
But
we were all in the, faculty and staff, we were in the Quick Arts Center, and, there have been some stories about how I'm sure people have read that the night before he had driven back from his son's soccer game in Maryland and driven through a snowstorm that hung him up for about 30 minutes in Pennsylvania, and he had his power steering went on him and everything, and he didn't get to Bona's the night before until like 3 a.m, and he then had to be introduced to campus, and he flipped the switch on and his personality took over the room. But when he was introduced, one of our alums, Mr. Les Quick III introduced him to the campus community, and he told a story and then showed a page of a yearbook from Bishop Timon High School. And Les Quick's roommate, I believe, it's either a roommate or a friend. I'm trying to remember exact details, but it's either a roommate or a friend here, was a classmate of Dr. DePerro's back at Bishop Timon. And he sent this copy of the yearbook page with Dr. DePerro's picture to Les Quick for his introduction. And Dr. DePerro had signed his friend's yearbook and said, "I'm so jealous that you get to go to St. Bonaventure. I really wanted to go there." And that moment was like such a triumph. Like we like, man, we nailed it. Like we got the perfect guy for this job. Like he is the perfect guy. And then, now you think about it now and like how lucky we were to have had our 3.5 to 4 years with him here. And whomever follows him, I know that we will hire, the right guy or the right girl at the right time for who we are now. But who we are now and the position that we're in, where we are stable, we are growing, we have brand new programs and an awesome new School of Health Professions and everything. We're excited looking forward. Who we are now is a lot of that is because of who Dr. DePerro was for us then and through his entire time here. So whoever follows, whether he or she, they do have some big shoes to fill because he was very, very special to this campus community, and he made such a crazy positive impact while he was here.
I would thank you all for joining us today. We have to wrap up, but I hope that a few stories helped you remember who he is and everything. Thank you for joining us. I'm Cassidey Kavathas, and this is Dean Whitcomb, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Cassidy.
Have a great day.